If you're just joining us, this is the France 24 debate. We're looking at the outrage in India over that gang rape and murder of a 23-year-old medical student aboard a moving bus back in December. The case brought to court for the first time this Thursday. 5 men charged. A sixth person underage who faces charges in criminal court. They could get the death penalty. With us to talk about it from New Delhi, France 24 correspondent Natasha Butler, from Mumbai, journalist and activist Divya Rajagopal of the Times of India, and DTV's Nupur Tiwari is with us in the studio, as is French criminal lawyer Martine Moscovici. Welcome back. A few days back, there was a junior minister in India who set off a fresh controversy with a tweet. He said, wondering what interest is served by continuing anonymity of the Delhi gang rape victim. Why not name and honor her as a real person with her own identity? The minister, Shashi Tharoor, going on to say that if the family so desires, they would name an anti-rape bill after her. Do you think naming the victims is the right thing or not?
It depends on the person. Some victims want to be named, and some prefer to remain anonymous. It really depends. But naming a law after a victim, I'm not sure it's a good thing to do. It's not very interesting.
Divya Rajagopal, your thoughts on this?
Well, she's dead, and it's the worst thing that you can do to a dead person is not reveal her identity and keep her anonymous, and more so when she has fought such a gruesome. I mean, she died fighting such a gruesome attack. So it would be really, really sad if we don't reveal her identity, especially when she is dead. I mean, if she was alive, she had the chance to choose whether to come out or not. But when she is dead, it's up to the family to decide if they want to reveal her name. And if the reports which has come out in the last couple of days, it says that the family is okay with going public with her name. So her identity should be revealed. That's my opinion. But naming an anti-rape bill after her, that's not a great idea. But it's imperative that her identity should be revealed. There is no reason why they should keep it anonymous.
Nupur Tiwari?
I don't think it's imperative. There I'd have to disagree with Divya. But at the same time, I mean, the person does deserve some amount of dignity, given that what happened to her and her death has mobilized so many Indians to come out and talk about it, and the whole world is now talking about this case. I think it would be dignifying for her to be named, but I don't think it's imperative, you know. I mean, a lot of Indians have accepted her as this anonymous woman who actually stands for a number of women who are never named, and a number of women who actually never even report or are not even alive to actually go and report their cases, you know.
And you mentioned how suddenly there's been this media frenzy inside of India. When you open the front page this Thursday of Divya Rajagopal's paper, The Times of India, the lead story about a 17-year-old girl who fell prey to two cousins who allegedly raped her. Obviously, Divya, that story wouldn't be on the front page of your paper if it hadn't been for this horrible incident in Delhi.
I just have to clarify one thing. I work for the Economic Times newspaper, which is the financial newspaper of the Times of India group. They are owned by the same guys. So just a clarification on that side. But the views which I'm expressing today is my own views. So yeah, I mean, if the Times of India, there is this again a whole media debate that's going on, that should the identity be revealed or not, and I think people have still not taken a stand on where exactly do they want to be.
But you're right, Francois, because today, even on my channel and on a lot of other newspapers, everybody has been talking about a whole lot of cases that have come up. Of women who've been gang raped, of women who haven't got justice. But at the same time, there's also a critique. I mean, that's my personal standpoint again, is that we only talk about these very sensational rape cases. It may not be the right time to talk about this because, it's such an emotive issue. But at the same time, we do tend to talk about gang rapes of women being paraded naked, where there's this sort of voyeurism. But there's so many other cases that we don't talk about. But it's a good start to at least start talking about other cases as well today, and to give them room in headlines.
The case in question here, you mentioned in part one, we're talking about a 23-year-old medical student who was raped and murdered, someone who was articulate. Here in France, I just want to talk about this for a second. The state prosecutor is appealing the recent acquittal of 10 of 14 suspects in gang rapes that happened in a very poor working class suburb of Paris. And the facts date back to 1999, 2001. And the victims have, one of them gave an interview where she said, I sometimes feel like I was the accused, not the victim. And they're questioning, because it's dragged on for so long and now there's going to be an appeal process. Was it all worth it?
The problem in this kind of case is when a victim, a rape victim, goes to court, there is a concept of, is she a good victim or not? Is she remembering everything that has happened, every place, every man, every color of the room, every hour? And if she did, she's a good victim. If she fails to remember what has happened, which is normal because it was a very long time ago, and she can't remember every fact because it was so horrible, that in this case, if she's not what I call a good victim, there's going to be what has happened recently. 10 out of 13 people won't be convicted at all. And it's a big problem in France when I defend a victim, a person who has been raped. I have to think, is he or is she a good victim? Will she remember everything what has happened? Will she remember that it has happened at 2:05 and not 6:05? And it's very, very embarrassing. So I have to choose for these victims whether they'll go to this high court or lower court. If I think she's not a good victim, I will go to a lower court because there are only professional magistrates, and I'm sure the defenders will be punished.
So basically, this kind of apathy towards victims is something that doesn't exist only in India. It's worldwide, I think, where the onus is really placed on the victims, and also the apathy of the police force. I mean, the people who are registering the case, they ask, like in India, there was recently we talked about how policemen actually asked the women which part of the clothing was taken off first. I mean, it's a very humiliating experience, apart from the 2-finger test, which is an abominable thing that's done to women to check whether they have had regular sexual intercourse, which would mean that, they're used to sexual activity and therefore might have invited this on them. So these are the things that today in India we are talking about very forcefully. And we are actually beginning to change the discourse, where we are saying that, we do not have to talk about the victims in this fashion. We are increasingly talking also about survivors, about women who have been raped. On our own channel, NDTV, we had somebody come out. She had been raped and she came out and she said, don't call me a victim, I'm a survivor. So, this kind of shift, if it can happen in India, I think that will be a huge achievement. And other than that, the other thing we need to talk about is also, the perpetrators of the crime, where very often we talk about these men as monsters, as if they've come from outer space or somewhere else. These are men who are living, with us. They are our neighbors, or they are in our environment, so we don't have to call them monsters. These are things that really need to change, I think, everywhere. But I'm glad that at least we are being able to talk about these things today.
Which brings us to the point of the discussion where we talk about what it says about India. An awful lot of we were talking. There was a few months back, the Thomson Reuters Foundation put out a survey on the status of women of the G20 nations. And India ranked dead last, behind even Saudi Arabia. And Natasha Butler, for those here in Paris who don't follow news in India very closely, and there you see the numbers, that there are 52% of women who thinks it's justifiable for men to beat his wife, this kind of thing. This doesn't mesh with the stories we read in the newspaper, Natasha, about how India is this emerging economic power and that it's got this modern and youthful workforce and that it's looking to the future and more young girls go to school. Which is the real India in a way?
Well, they're all the real India, and that's the great complexity of this country, because on one hand, India is shining, it is booming in many ways for some, but there are lots of others who are being left behind. It's an enormous country, a massive population. And one thing that this rape case has really highlighted is that there are major issues in terms of the position of women in India. We're talking about rape cases today. We're talking about some of the most brutal ones, as you say, have appeared in the papers over the past few days. But really, the focus needs to be on another conversation. That's what's happening with women in India. Why is female feticide so widespread? Why is misogyny so widespread? Why are women treated as second-class citizens? Why can't women go out after night and feel safe like they should, feel protected by the police? They should be able to report sexual violence to the police without being told to go home and stop making a fuss. Or they should be able to report those sort of things without being shamed or feeling there's some sort of stigma to it. So in many ways, you see, there are many Indias. It's very complex. But I think that perhaps these protests will allow some of those conversations, those real conversations, which in many ways are very taboo at the moment, those conversations to come out.
Divya Rajagopal, there are laws that have that are no longer on the books when it comes to things like dowries and this kind of thing. The old caste system, is it still intact, or does it still exist in India? What's the real status of women as far as that goes?
That's very much, I mean, and as cliche as it might sound, but no one is talking about it openly, that the Hindu religion, which is practiced by the majority of the Indian population, probably and might be the reason for this large-scale discrimination that's happening against women. The Hindu text, the religious text, sanctions ill treatment of women. Lord Rama, which is the most commonly worshipped god among Hindus in India, sanctioned burning his own wife to test her virginity, and he's still the most revered god. No one is talking about how Hindu texts, the Hindu religion breeds of patriarchy, and if you don't question that, if you don't question those things and the patriarchy that kind of comes with that, you're not going to address the issues of dowry death or rape or violence against women. The patriarchy, the Hindu patriarchal society validates and justifies all these things. So if you don't start on with that,
but hang on a second. You say all that, but for instance, you had female prime ministers long before we did. In fact, you've even had a female president. We've never had that in France.
Right, that's because the Indian constitution considers all men and women equal. The Hindu religion does not. So the constitution of India is completely different from the religion that the large majority of people practice. I think that's exactly what people are not talking about it.
Nupur Tiwari?
I think we're mixing up a whole lot of things over here. One is, the thing about statistics, I mean, you have to be very cautious when looking at statistics about sexual assault and rape, etc., because it depends on whether there are more women actually going and reporting rape or not. I don't know whether in Saudi Arabia women are actually free to go and talk about these things, go alone to the police and report this case or not. The question of religion is very, very complex. Of course, there is legitimacy in a lot of religious mythology, religion as well in India. But apart from that, today, what's happening today is that in reality, women are not being able to find their place. And that is partially because a lot of women are also responsible. Some of the women who have been treated badly actually turn into perpetrators of the same injustices, where they tell their daughters to behave in a certain way, and, where they actually encourage this kind of idea that, rapes happen because male desire is uncontrollable. So you have to make sure that you don't, project yourself as someone who has desire. So women in India have to keep their desire and their bodies hidden. So there are, of course, I mean, it's a whole lot of problems that we are facing today. But I think the one thing that we can learn from this case is that this kind of convulsion that's happening in India today, if we can actually direct it to somewhere, if something can actually change, because there are strict laws in India for rape. You can get life imprisonment for rape, but if you've got a judge who's sitting over there who thinks that this is not a serious thing to talk about, or if the policeman doesn't want to register your case because he thinks that he has other things to worry about and that it's not serious enough to talk about this, then these are the real problems.
Martine Moscovici?
It happens also in France that police doesn't want to register what women say when they say they've been raped. Sometimes they don't want to register it. It happens also in France.
So how reliable are statistics then when it comes to actual numbers?
What we know is 10% of women who have been raped go to police. And from this 10%, let's say half of the cases will go to court, which is really not very much. And there are 90%, what we call a gray number, of women who never complain, who never report what happened.
And I believe there's one woman woman dies every 3 days because of domestic violence in France.
Even more, because
Closer to 1 out of every 2.
Yeah, it's one woman out every 2 days.
1 out of every 2 days, and yet
Dies from violence.
And that's not a headline story in this country.
It happens sometimes, but not very often. Well, 2 months ago, there was a woman who's been accused of killing her husband, and the DA asked for her to be not to be punished because she was in self-defense. It happened once in France, that's all.
All right, final question, and I'll put it to Natasha Butler because we're almost out of time. Just, we see the scale of the outrage, again, throughout of India. Do you think this is going to be sustained for a long time to come?
Well, in terms of the protests on the streets, I think it's unlikely that people will continue to get out there and campaign. I mean, there might be some, but maybe not so many, and it's extremely cold at the moment. But I think in terms of the momentum, there's certainly an enormous momentum, and many women and men, I should say, really want to ride that momentum and make sure that change happens. Now, whether that's change in the law or change in society, I think it's in everyone's interest that something does shift and that things certainly don't go backwards, and that those conversations are being had, that people are talking about these matters, about women's issues, about sexual issues, talking about them, at least trying to talk about them openly, and perhaps that's one of the ways forward.
All right, Natasha Butler, who will be continuing to cover this story for us. Thanks for joining us from Delhi. I want to thank Divya Rajagopal for being with us from Mumbai, Nupur Tiwari here in the studio, as well as Martine Moscovici. And thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.